Good morning, everyone. It's good to be here in person. It's good to see all your faces. Before we get in with Luis, I think we should set the stage a little bit. Analysts expect New York to be a $7 billion cannabis industry when everything comes online. But to get from here to there, there's a lot of steps. I think regulators have said they hope stores will be open this year. That might be a tall task. It might be into 2023. All that being said, the cannabis industry has a very exciting future, as Luis is well aware, and we're going to get into all of that with our guests. So, Luis, welcome, and it's good to be here with you.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy.
Awesome.
All right, Luis, do you want to start with a short intro of yourself, and then we can get going here?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everyone. It's very exciting to be here. My name is Luis Merchant. I'm the president and CEO of Flora Growth Corp. I've been 20 years in the United States. I'm originally from Colombia. Came here to, get my graduate studies, met my wife, and have been here because she decided we were going to live here. I have a career in retail and CPG, have worked for companies like Target and Macy's. I spent the last 8 to 10 years here in New York City working at corporate and Macy's. I'm very familiar, of course, with the fashion and buying scene in Macy's, running around to market meetings for the last 5 years. And at Macy's, I had the opportunity to run the beauty business. I was responsible for the sales organization, over $3.5 billion of revenue, and about 20,000 sales colleagues across the United States. I joined Flora a couple of years ago, and the idea of the founders was to build a global cannabis company. We don't believe that cannabis is going to be a regional play. We believe that in the future, cannabis trade will reach all borders, and as regulators understand that this is going to happen, the companies that start to prepare for that trade are the ones that are going to win the market share. And Flora has been an incredible story. Obviously, we have accomplished a lot of milestones, the biggest one becoming public in May of 2021. We are the first company to list on NASDAQ, and we're happy to be here.
All right, thank you. Now, Luis, Flora has made quite a few acquisitions recently. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I feel like that's a trend we're seeing across the space. What's your strategy and what's your ultimate goal there?
Yeah, look, the cannabis industry is highly commoditized today. There is a lot of gap in terms of quality and offerings for consumers. And we believe that the companies that are going to win the market share game in cannabis are the ones that are developing great products, that are developing great experiences, and are connecting with communities. So our M&A strategy has been aimed at that. We have 3 pillars of our M&A strategy. The first one is people. We're only working with companies that are looking to invest in their current businesses, that have perhaps reached ceiling that they're not able to overcome because they need more capital, they need to amplify their reach, they need to amplify their distribution. So we're only working with great human capital. We're also working with companies that have developed a great product portfolio and that have a robust client database, and companies that have a potential for great distribution internationally. So we have made acquisitions like Vessel, which the team at Vessel is here today and will speak over the next couple of days, and Just CBD. Both of those brands are widely renowned not only in the United States but also globally, and have tremendous potential for growth.
Can you talk about, maybe start with the international opportunity for Flora growth? I mean, we were just discussing about your operations in Colombia, you're in Miami, you're all over the world. So can you talk a little bit about how you see the cannabis industry evolving globally?
Yeah, I was telling Jeremy before we jumped on stage how beautiful our growing Colombia is. And I think the easiest sell that I've ever had to make with an investor is to take him to Bucaramanga. We're growing cannabis at an altitude of 1,500 meters above sea level. We're on top of a mountain, and you see the clouds come in, turning into mist, and spray cannabis that is grown organically. And we're growing it at one of the lowest production costs in the world, at 6 cents per gram of dry flower. So you can grow at an incredible cost advantage and deliver some of the best qualities that you can find out there. That's why we're in Colombia. And Colombia has the know-how. The people in Colombia have been growing flowers for decades. Colombia is the #1 producer of flowers in the world. In fact, all of you here who have ever received flowers, it's likely they're from Colombia. 70% of the flowers that come into the United States come from Colombia. And cannabis is a specialty cut flower. So we are growing flower in the best place to grow flower in the world. If you're going to buy wine, you're going to buy wine from some of the few regions in the world that are able to grow the grapes for wine. It's the same with cannabis. And we believe that being in Colombia will present the opportunity for us to distribute cannabis all over the world. We call it the green bread basket of the world.
Can you talk a little bit about how we get to a future where you can export cannabis from Colombia? Like, what has to happen for us to get there?
We're there already. So it's important that people know that the global cannabis trade is here. Colombia is already at the vanguard of cannabis regulatory framework. We are already exporting several of our CPG products from Colombia into 11 countries in the world. The non-psychoactive portion of cannabis, there is no distinction in Colombia between hemp and cannabis. We just separate non-psychoactive from psychoactive. The non-psychoactive portion of cannabis is being exported as we speak, and the psychoactive portion, THC flower, was given the go-ahead in February of 2022. Now, cultivators need to put their plants on the ground, and it takes about 13 to 15 weeks to grow the plants, dry them, and export them. So you should see exports of psychoactive flower out of Colombia by the second half of this year, which is very exciting, and it will immediately bring a call to action to those people that are in the cannabis industry and want to manufacture great quality product to source their materials from Colombia.
All right, I think it's time for our audience Q&A now. Does anyone in the audience have a question? We can bring a mic over to them. Another one?
Hello, my name is Kat Espinosa, and I'm a native of San Diego, California. And a lot of the climate that I see in cannabis is involved with the testing of cannabis. So how do you see in Colombia the testing being developed to make sure that we are receiving the highest quality of cannabis?
Yeah, it goes into, thank you for that question. I think it goes into standards. The standard around the global trade of cannabis needs to be established by international agencies, and that's what is happening today. For example, the cultivation of flower needs to be GACP certified, which is an international standard. Our grow is organic, and it's equivalent to USDA organic, which once again is an international standard. When it comes to testing, the same type of metric applies. We do our own testing in our cultivation facility. We have HPCL machinery, which basically is, I'm not going to get technical, but it's just testing to ensure that we have the appropriate certificates of quality, that we are able to provide the best materials to companies worldwide. But also in the countries of origin, once the material reaches that country of origin, there's also third-party lab testing from each one of those countries of origin that ensures the quality standards inside of those geographies are being met.
Hi there. Oh, sorry about that. It may be speculative at this point, but I'm curious, what's your take on if eventually THC or psychoactive cannabis is rescheduled here in the U.S., to what extent Colombia will be prepared to supply international markets, and when?
I don't think it's speculative. I think it's a matter of when, not if, right? And there's a number of legislative acts in Congress that are being reviewed, the two biggest ones being the MORE Act and the SAFE Act. Both of those are aimed at either providing access to capital for cannabis companies or decriminalizing and eventually federalizing cannabis, including psychoactive. It will happen. And when it does, there's going to be a transitional period in which the multi-state operators are going to be faced with the reality that they are in an international market, and they're going to have to compete with Colombia. And Colombia is going to be grabbing market share at a very rapid pace because of the competitive advantages that I highlighted.
I think we've got time for one more.
I can add a question if there's none from the audience. So, Luis, you mentioned that you feel like Colombia is going to have a big advantage when the U.S. opens up to possible international trading. Are there any other countries that you feel like might also be wanting to jump in on that opportunity or are well positioned to?
Yes. Yesterday we were talking with my group about what is happening with the cannabis industry internationally today. Is kind of like prohibition ending 100 years ago in the United States, but it's not happening in the United States. It's happening all over the world. We have calls. We're an international company, and we're one of the most renowned international companies because we have been able to execute on our strategy. But there's in Africa, in South Africa, in Lesotho, there's a lot of action there. There's a lot of action in Malta. Portugal is rapidly expanding their operations. So is Italy. We're seeing dramatic change. The hemp industry in China has been around for a long time already. So what's happening with cannabis today is not inherent to just one geography. But I think the question that needs to be answered is, which country, which geography will be the most optimal for the grow of cannabis, and how do you take advantage of that international trade? And the answer to us is Colombia.
All right. Well, thank you, Luis, so much for your time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. We are now going to welcome up Elana Tamas from Tax Advisor and with Anchin. And we're also going to bring up Kiana Anvaripour from the CEO of Number 9.
Try not to fall. Hey guys, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. Do you guys want to start with a quick intro of yourselves? Elana, why don't you start?
Sure. My name is Elana Tamas. I'm a tax accountant. I do tax advisory and tax research and specialize in cannabis. I work at a firm called Anchin. We've been around in New York for about 100 years, and we've got a lot of depth because of our experience in so many different markets, one of which is cannabis. And I think particularly today, I wanted to talk about our consumer products because of the fact that cannabis and consumer products are inextricably linked. So we view ourselves as partners of our clients. We walk with our clients from their startup phase until eventually $100 million of revenue through exit, and we're able to help people navigate the terrain that they have to go through, whether it's a privately held company, whether it's a high net worth individual, or a fund.
Thanks. Kiana?
Hi, my name is Kiana Anvaripour. I'm the founder of Number 9. We are a cannabis, wellness, and now Web3 marketing agency, and I'll touch on why Web3 soon. Number 9 is an homage to Delta 9, the cannabinoid we know as THC. I first started in cannabis in 2017 from a career in fashion and beauty. I was first at Bebo. So for those of you that don't know Bebo was one of the first luxury brands on the market. And we actually got acquired by GTI in 2019. After that, I joined Sweet Flower as their CMO. And Sweet Flower, for those of you who don't know, it's one of the largest dispensary groups in Los Angeles. So I've worked on the retail and brand side for many years, 20 plus years. So, and I'm very excited to be here because New York is so exciting and bustling right now, and really a brand capital as a brand builder myself. And we have a lot of great learnings that we can pass on from California market, which has been incredibly bumpy recently. So
Appreciate it.
yeah.
Elana, we were just chatting a few minutes ago. You're an accountant. Can you tell us a little bit about 280E and why it affects so many cannabis companies, the history and what it entails?
I sure can. So it's interesting because the tax law in the US is actually agnostic towards whether or not you derive your income legally or illegally. So theoretically, the code section 61 of the Internal Revenue Code says that you have to pay tax on your income wherever it is sourced, and case law has established the fact that your income can be derived legally or illegally, but you still have to pay tax on that. So So theoretically, my accounting firm is able to take the same deductions and do their taxes in the same way that an illegal gambling operation would be able to do. So what happened is that there was a case called Edmondson in the 1980s during the time of the war on drugs. And Edmondson was a drug trafficker, and I think he was caught, and then he had to pay taxes. So the IRS said, you can't take these deductions for your rent, for your phone. And he said, but I can. I have to pay taxes. So what happened was that the court sided with Edmondson, and Edmondson was able to take all of his expenses that any other business would be able to take. There was outrage, and what happened was 280E was enacted, which said, regardless of the fact if you're legal or illegal, if you're deriving your income that way, to the extent that you're trafficking controlled 1 or 2 substances, you cannot take regular business deductions. What that means is that you're effectively taxed on many of your expenses. So you are able to take cost of goods sold. It's actually constitutionally protected. You arrive at your income in order to figure out, you arrive at your income with incorporating the reduction for cost of goods sold. And then after that, what you do is you take other business deductions. So a cannabis plant-touching company is unable to take those regular business deductions. Marketing, rent, depending on what kind of business it is, will determine what types of costs are considered cost of goods sold, and everything else is completely off the table.
All right.
No, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Right. So, Kiana, as the CEO of a business within the cannabis industry, but one that doesn't necessarily touch the plant, I'm wondering how, if at all, does that affect you? And, how has it affected some of the other companies that you've worked for?
So I think talking on the brand side and the retailer side, number 9 is a little bit different, obviously, because we're a marketing agency, but we still bank with a cannabis bank. We really have to be very careful in how we take capital from cannabis companies. But as a retailer, it's very challenging, right? The traditional things that you do, you cannot, get a tax break from. So, from traditional, that's why you have to really be comfortable with working in the gray as an operator and a marketer, and this is kind of what what we do at Number 9 is help people mine through that, from how you gift things, from influencer marketing, and how you do that to still run it through metric, how you do data collection through programmatic, how you do billboards, how you market, from your out of home. Every single thing that you have to do to you kind of get to your audience and your community from a marketing side of things, you have to be comfortable with how you message it, how the copy is written, everything that you do. So it's above board, but still living in the gray. So.
Maybe, Kiana, you could start with this question, but what are some mistakes that you see clients making that are sort of common that you'd like to fix?
Well, it's not so much, I would say the industry, back to the data collection, what I really did at Sweet Flower, which, because as a frustrated brand, I was running Bebo, was that we never got data. You don't even know who your customer is half the time, right? You're not getting the reporting, you're just selling and not getting it. Like a traditional D2C business, you sell it online, you know who your customers are, you do Google ads, you do Facebook ads, you can really get strategic about that. So what we developed, because of that frustration, was co-op marketing packages at Sweet Flower. And this is what also I do with a lot of the retailers that I work with now, is how can we partner? Without them doing well, we don't do well, and vice versa. So, whether it's influencer programming, digital ads that we run, we would give them reporting. Now in California, was this model for many years called the slotting fee, and you just didn't know where that money went. It was $10,000 to be on our shelves, but you don't know what you get out of it. And so again, just the California market is very crazy. We've been medical since '96, so there's a lot of bad habits that we had. So what I did was really work with the brands and create these packages so that you're not just doing a slotting fee and not where your money is. You're actually getting data. You understand where your customers are. What else are they buying? What is that intent? So that when you do development and you grow your brand, you're actually doing it with intention. So that's kind of the thing, that the message that I want to relay to retailers here, and as we're growing in New York, is really prepare for that and partner with your brands so that you guys can have a successful launch whenever you do it, and also you're collecting data and understanding your customer. And then that allows you to go deeper within your community. As Flora mentioned, it's really important to know your community and your audience.
Elana, I want to pose the same question to you. What are the biggest mistakes you see among your clients or potential clients, and what advice do you offer them once you see those mistakes?
I think that there are a couple of things to be able to really do strongly. Number one is making sure that your books are appropriate, and I'll take a step back from that. There's very little guidance, and I love operating in gray areas also, which is why I became super passionate intellectually about this area. But so there's very little guidance under the law in what you can do and what you can't do. But one thing that you can do is, to the extent that you truly have a separate business from your plant-touching business, you can operate two businesses. One which you can take deductions for in the way any other business can, and one where it's treated as your plant-touching company. Now, what happens in a lot of the cases is that people commingled their books, even when they did have two separate companies, and that created the inability, even if they had a separate company, to show the extent to which they were deriving revenue also from a non-plant-touching business, which would allow them to take deductions and then not be taxed on the expenses associated with those. So the first really important thing is to make sure that you understand, what is a separate business? Do I have one? And am I separating these enough so that I can take advantage of some savings? So that's something that's really important, and being able to analyze correctly, making sure that people were properly advised whether they had a separate business or not. So that's something important. Another thing that's really important is for taking cash, more than $10,000, every single transaction you need to fill out this Form 8300, and that's important to be aware of. So that's a really big mistake that people can make when they're transacting or they're taking large amounts of cash. That needs to be reported. It's another mistake. Let's see, there's so many.
Yeah, there's so many.
But everybody's trying to do well. It's just that what's great and horrible in the same way about this industry is that it's a new, people are learning as the industry grows what is the right thing to do and how to do these things right. So in New York, we're lucky to have learned a lot of lessons from early adopters like California, and we still have cases that we're learning from that are coming out from the early 2000s or the early 2010s that we can use and create something that could potentially work based on other, not mistakes, but just almost like no guidance.
Kiana, you raised an interesting point about the relative opacity of data in the cannabis industry. Could you talk a little bit about that and how that maybe compares to previous industries you've worked in?
Oh, I mean, you're basically flying blind a lot of the times. That's basically what it is. You don't really have much of it. And it's very much anecdotal as well. So you'll go visit a bud tender and say, so what do you think about the product? What have people been saying? They'll mention on your Instagram, they'll DM you. But, it's really getting close to your customer that's going to be key, as close as you can. So, before COVID, it was very much an experiential focused industry. So we experienced quite like the Whole Foods model, right? Yeah. You didn't do the traditional data, but you went and you had sampling. Pre-2018, you could actually sample, live products. After that, you can't. In dispensaries, of course, right now, it's only non-medicated. And then, I think the traditional data collection is just, Google doesn't allow it. I mean, there's many retailers and brands that still do the ads. You just have to be playing whack-a-mole every single day. They go up, they go down. Same thing with your Instagram. You can't do sponsored ads. But the great thing is there are other platforms to do that and find your people. For example, in what I mentioned before. So Twitter is something that you can put a bud up, you can talk about it, you can drop in codes. They're not going to shut you down. Discord is a new platform that people are, and this is why we're sort of diving into the Web3 community, because it's rabid and they love cannabis They really do, to the point where, we've done events and the bar, the alcohol bar, there's nobody there, but everybody's at the bud bar. So yeah, it's really finding your community, finding new ways to access them, because the traditional ways to collect data, there's just fragmented. So we work with partners that provide dashboards so that programmatic can give you data. But it's still, with especially back to the point of the retailer, when you're working off delivery, knowing where you're placing your ads, how you convert them. And during COVID, we were seeing 10x return because everybody was at home and they saw those ads and they wanted to purchase. But so anyway, I could talk about data collection forever and the challenges, but it's really knowing your community and going deep and finding new ways to access them. So.
All right, guys, I think we have time for one really quick question. Whoever shoots their hand up first, and then we need to go over to the next group. Going once, going twice. All right, well, thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Hello. Thank you so much, Elana and Kiana. We're now going to welcome up Mitch Baruchowitz, with a managing partner with Merida Capital Holdings.
I'm really surprised no one had a question for the accountant.
Hey, Mitch.
Yeah, how's it going?
How's it going, Mitch?
I was just thinking back to 5 years or 4 years ago when we did the first one. Yeah, how much more mature and handsome you look. But yeah, a lot more sophisticated people in the crowd too. But yeah.
Introduce yourself and let everyone know who you are, where you're coming from.
I'm Mitch Baruchowitz. I'm the managing partner of Merida Capital. I think we're somewhere in 70 portfolio companies in cannabis. That's all we do. We're on our fourth fund. We focus on a very vision-focused, we're financial people, but we really do build companies more than invest in them. I'm sure that might come up, but previously, when she was talking about collecting data, I don't remember which one was talking about that, but that's what we do. We collect data, we collect information, and the reason luxury for us is such a great category is because it's really the tip of the spear of innovation, right? Like the scene in The Devil Wears Prada, how she's talking about how this blue sweater ended up on, you're wearing this crappy sweater from the Gap, but that started as like a runway, the color gets popular, and so the evolution of the consumer, the evolution of data, and how much more volume there is leads to consumer decisions that ultimately lead to the products that you see on the shelves. But without luxury, you wouldn't have that innovation. So it's great to be here. I know there's a lot of portfolio companies here, so it's always great to be amongst friends.
All right, Mitch.
Yeah.
All right, Mitch, first question. You're a New York-based firm. Obviously,
Right.
You've been operating in the cannabis space for a really long time. Are you excited about New York? If so, why? What do you expect the market to look like here?
Well, I'm excited and a little bit, I guess, pensive would be a way to describe it, because New York, and like we're seeing on the federal level, there's a huge constituency that just wants legality, and then there's a constituency that wants to make political points, and then there's a constituency that wants to just consume. And I think when you look at those three things together, there's not a great alignment, right? One person wants to move quickly, you have to build a program. If you don't build a program right, then the consumption doesn't happen the way that supports people spending money. So when you look at the things that are unexciting, I think the political process has been kind of mismanaged in one way. It's great to have like a consumer board, but you could have done this years ago, right? When you look back, nothing's gonna happen so special in New York that couldn't have happened in other states that they could have borrowed from. So I don't like that. What I am excited about is I think New York sets the standard. It's Rome in the Roman Empire, right? For the United States and really for the world. And I think the legality and how a New York program, if you have consumption lounges, and if you look at how the ecosystem of New York's gonna have to change to account for much more consumption. I mean, you smell it on the streets everywhere, but people have never had a chance to consume cannabis in the East Coast generally, legally, right? California's been legal since '96. It was quasi-medical. So the understanding of the Californian isn't like the understanding of a New Yorker who had real illegality, right? Real, true, stigmatic illegality. And I think I'm incredibly excited to see what happens when the most sophisticated city meets something that already has 5, 6, 7 billion of consumption here illegally, right? This year, the medical market may do 200 million. So think of how much step function scale is going to happen. So it's good for the ecosystem, it's good for the world, it's good for MSOs who make more money. The more money they make, maybe stocks will get going again. But so I think New York is a really important place. And most importantly, I care about legality because anyone going to prison for this is just an outrage. Illegality has been one of the biggest policy disasters ever. And I'm not going to go into like, you know, the war on drugs and stuff, but I think I've spoken enough about that in life that people know where we stand on that, you know, about helping social equity applicants, but not giving them like a bone, giving them a real opportunity, funding companies. And that's why, you know, when you look next door, the female consumer, the chance for feminization of the space, you know, it used to be a male-dominated space, and really understanding the female consumer is an important element of that. So I'm excited. I think New York will help drive that forward.
So maybe look into your crystal ball a little bit. How do you expect New York cannabis to evolve? Like you touched on it, how it's different than California, but thinking about New York as a center of fashion, design, hospitality, what are we going to see in the future?
Yeah, well, I think, consumption lounges is definitely something I think, just to be like on the boring side again, I mean, you know, it's always a tough act to follow the accountants when you talk because everyone's like half asleep, but no, I'm just kidding. No. But I just one boring element that I think is really exciting that everyone should consider is no urbanly dense environment has ever had legal cannabis. So what's going to happen in condos and co-ops where you have real laws against illicit activity and maybe getting kicked out of a condo for consuming? So people are going to consume in consumption lounges. So consumption lounges in New York, I think, are going to be wildly unique and exciting, and they'll have like great food. It'll be like an exquisite experience. In some cases, and there'll probably be some crappy experiences too. But if you look at like the illegal lounges, like the Happy Monkey and stuff, they do an amazing job because New York does not tolerate mediocrity very well. It's too expensive to operate here. It is different. And I think one of the things you're going to see is when you get an illegal market, a true illegal market like in East Coast where there's really no sense of legality, and you turn it legal, the insights you get from that are what the new consumer looks like. People going from never using and thinking like, oh, that guy smells like patchouli or whatever, to I want to go to a consumption lounge or I want to buy in a dispensary, or 80%, and I know I'm going to stomp a little on Gary Allen from New Frontiers data, but we do own a chunk and we do get their data. Gary and I were talking the other day how 85% of women who consume cannabis on a monthly basis have never been in a dispensary. Because that experience was a West Coast, it was sort of, dingy experience in the 90s and 2000s, and now you have this like Apple store, and so females are the fastest growing consumer base. And I think New York, because of the high finance and high style, you're going to see dispensaries that are glam, and you're going to see, you're going to see a female-focused dispensary experience, and you're going to see probably some, man cave experience too for like the guys who want to buy as much as possible. So when that all comes together, that confluence is where you get that's the front edge. That's like where the tide recedes in the ocean, and I think that's where you find the real gems of an opportunity. So for us, we're always excited about the disconnect between what people assume is going to happen and then what really happens. And so the crystal ball is, I think New York is going to drive what it looks like when normalization, truly lands into these illegal markets. I think you get a little sense of it in Illinois, a little sense. But I think New York, everyone always says Chicago's the New York of the Midwest. But instead of Iowans going into Chicago, you have New Jersey where it's going to be legal, Massachusetts. So you have a huge expectation of excellence. And I think that tends to drive better product innovation, pricing. I mean, New York's medical market is really tight. This is not a state that had a very lax program. So I think you can see a lot of changes. So I'm excited about that. Yeah.
All right, I think it's time to open it up to audience questions. Anyone have a question? I think I see someone in the back over there.
Hey there. So coming from Massachusetts, we're about to have some great delivery options. So in the future, as we're thinking about delivering e-commerce experience, essentially, especially with New Yorkers are already getting delivery right to their door.
Right.
I'm curious about how that landscape might transition into delivery, and that these operators are considering their digital experience with consumers for that 80% of women that will never step foot in a retail location, but they'll definitely take an order.
Yeah, it's interesting. What you're saying touches on, I'd say, like 9 to 10 things that we used to talk about that no one was talking about, which is the normalization, and how, if you remember the coronavirus discussions we had, how curbside and delivery really were important changes that the industry didn't have originally that now sort of provide this experience that's similar to the illegal market experience, which is crucial to transitioning people, because the 4 things the legal market does better: choice, access, quality, and safety. Price is an issue, and access used to be a real issue. So delivery is a huge thing. So for Massachusetts, you're going to see the transition from the illegal market much quicker. But it also touches on a few things which I think highlight to your first question about the problems with New York is just giving licenses to people who used to be drug dealers. It's a delivery experience is really a back end, it's a delivery, it's a validated experience. So it's not necessarily for like the street level person. Like, what is going to be their back end? I mean, are the 10 operators now going to trust their delivery experience to someone who doesn't have like a functioning GUI or AI or API to a system? So I always talk about like, does the state really think about this? This is an electronic business. They want validation. They want audit tickets. They want to know that when you delivered $500 or something, we know who it went to, so that person's not out, reselling it or something. Which I think is, you don't expect someone to buy Oreos from like a supermarket and then resell them. So this is a totally different experience. And I also think that the other thing it touches on, which is really important, is normalization requires people to have the same experience that they used to have illegally that they can have legally, and an enhanced experience, because price may not be there. And I think when you look, the most important thing that ever will happen to all of us in the space is the transition from illicit consumers to legal. When you get that transition at a certain scale, then you get volume, then price comes down, and then the illegal market has no chance to compete at all. I don't care what people say, the quality is way better in the legal market at this point. The capital that's going into it, the safety, the labeling, everything that's happening on the legal market is better than the illegal market. It's not even close. We know it at Merida. There's tons of data that I could go through, but again, I don't want to stomp on what Gary Allen's going to talk about. But I'll just end by saying the experience of people being able to say, I used to get delivery, now I can get delivery. I used to do curbside, now I can do curbside. All the things they want to do with an enhanced, being able to look at menus. You can't do that in the illegal market. I mean, you can and you can't, but we know that like Weed Maps, how did that work out for Weed Maps, who, we took Leafly public. Weed Maps, everyone knows, used to do a lot of like the illegal market kind of like facilitation, not in a bad way. I mean, they helped develop a constituency, but the reality is the legal market means innovation, means better tools, better desktop tools, more efficiency, automation, better products. I mean, so really when you think about something like this, a place like Luxury Meets Cannabis is supposed to be like a conversation starter. What you do with it, the conversations you have, the people you meet, that's up to you. Right, from a business perspective, there's so many entrepreneurs here. I'm always blown away every year. By the way, and I just want to like say that like everyone here deserves like a huge amount of credit for like taking a chance, come here, spend money. If you're a sponsor or if you're promoting a product, like the chances people take in the cannabis industry are what literally get me excited every day, because it's never going to end. Right? If you think about like mini SUVs, they didn't even exist in 2002. Now 2020, go to the suburbs. You can't even find your car if you drive one of them in a lot, right? Like you literally have to drive like a sedan again to be able to find your car in a lot. But and cars are the most intransigent thing. People do not change their mind on their cars. They drive the same brands. So think of a whole new category that exists now in huge numbers that didn't exist. That's what luxury is. That's what you guys are the tip of the spear. You're going to create innovation. People are going to create other products, but someone has to be willing to spend the money and take the chances to build it. And that's why, for me, like, it's really still the beginning in cannabis. So I wake up every day feeling like the sun's just coming up. We're nowhere near even mid-morning in the cannabis industry. Yeah.
Got to wrap it up there.
I killed the
Thank you,
question.
Mitch.
Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Mitch.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you, Mitch. We're now going to bring up Rebecca Raphael, the Chief Revenue Officer of Curio Wellness, and Gena Surphlis, the founder and CEO of 024.
All right.
Do they work? Yeah.
All right. Hi, guys.
Hi.
How are you guys doing today?
Great. Thanks.
All right, Rebecca, do you want to start us off with a quick intro of yourself, and then
Sure.
Gena can hop in?
Thank you for having me. Good morning, everybody. My name is Rebecca Raphael. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Curio Wellness. We are a vertically integrated cannabis company based in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm here today to talk about Far & Daughter, which is our retail franchise dispensary business that we launched in August of 2021. Far & Daughter is Scandinavian for father and daughter, which I clearly am Scandinavian. And so the company was founded by my dad and my sister, and the name is a nod to our family business and the fact that what we're trying to create is a patient-led, community-inspired retail dispensary experience. But the Scandinavian part of it is that it's about form and function, and that to have the ability to franchise a dispensary business provides a measured, secure, and equitable opportunity for entrepreneurs to get into cannabis. And I'm particularly excited that we have a CW investment fund, which is a $30 million fund that allows diverse audiences the opportunity to become owner-operators of dispensaries by having access to capital.
All right, thank you, Gena.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm Gena Surphlis. I'm the founder and CEO of 024. We are a premium home fragrance brand, and we design fragrances with patented scent technology that targets and neutralizes the cannabis smell. I have a son who has sickle cell anemia, and he decided to transition from traditional medicine to cannabis. And one of the things we discussed was that there are many stereotypes and negative connotations surrounding cannabis, and one of them essentially is how it smells. So we aim to start a new dialogue around the smell and help to reverse these conversations around the stigma.
I am so curious. How does it work? How does it neutralize the smell? And I'm not a scientist, so please keep it high level.
I'm going to keep it very basic. Any odor elimination technology starts with fragrance and also technology. So there are a combination of materials in any smell, any malodor, and then there's another combination of materials that can neutralize it. So think of a magic bullet of materials that targets and neutralizes. Once the neutralizing is done, you clear the space and allow room for fragrance to permeate the space. When you don't have technology and you just simply spray your perfume over your consumption, you're essentially having a fragrance sit on top of the smell versus neutralizing the space to allow that to come through. So hope that was very simple.
No, interesting. Super interesting.
All right, Rebecca, I want to ask you a little bit about this franchise model that you guys are operating. Obviously, it's not something we've seen a lot in cannabis yet. Can you talk a little bit about how it came about and, like what you're aiming to do there?
Absolutely. So as dispensary owners, we're acutely aware of the complexities and nuances of running a dispensary. And the more people we spoke to, both in Maryland and in other states, they kept coming up to the same challenges of how do I manage bookkeeping and compliance? How do I do front of house merchandising and marketing? And it became incredibly obvious in some ways that the franchise model that exists in every other industry should exist in cannabis, where let's give our owners and operators a toolkit for how they manage all the operations associated with their business so that they can take time to focus on really what's important in all of our lives, which is the patient-led model and helping people develop a better quality of life through medicinal cannabis and through CBD and other cannabinoid-based products.
Can you talk a little bit about how you get customers through the door? Maryland is medical right now. It's obviously moving to recreational. Like, how do you get customers into a medical dispensary, and how are you prepping for the eventual consumer side?
So as we've heard, there is a true lack of structured data in cannabis, and it's a personal challenge for me because I come from an arts and tech background where that is how we made all of our decisions. So we've become very creative in our marketing around using social media to a certain extent. We do a lot of community outreach in the neighborhoods that surround our existing dispensary. We also use word of mouth and seek to find influencers in a more guerrilla marketing style. But with our model, because the front of the house of the dispensary is a holistic pharmacy, we can go out to larger audiences and talk to people about, are you looking for herbal supplements? Are you looking for acupuncture and massage? Come to Far & Daughter and find those services, and then that creates the pathway where we have the cannabis conversation.
Gena, a question for you. You run like a really interesting company where it serves the cannabis industry and cannabis consumers, but it's not directly cannabis. How do you sort of think about your marketing and your advertising, and are there certain restrictions that you keep in mind as you go about developing those strategies?
Yes, so we sit in a very interesting intersection in fragrance and cannabis. And so we do still have to be very careful with our marketing on social. We still can't say, cannabis. But at the same time, we know that that consumer is sometimes playing in both sides. You have a fragrance consumer who consumes cannabis, but you have a cannabis consumer who loves fragrance. And essentially, we are a home fragrance brand. So we just have to be really careful in that and how we speak about it. We really speak about it. Obviously, it's an ancillary product, and so we don't touch the plant, so that keeps some distance for us. But we do, like you, have to be very creative when we do that, so we're still doing with influencer partnerships. We collaborate with a lot of brands, and we are sold in dispensaries. So that's also a very interesting piece that we have to keep in mind.
Now, do you have any, like as an ancillary company, do you have any similar sort of banking issues that cannabis plant touching companies do have?
I don't, because I am a home fragrance brand. That's the industry that we sit in, and we just so happen to, because of the technology, can play in the cannabis ancillary space. So the good thing is I don't have those issues. The bad thing, though, it does still affect us when it comes to our marketing. We've been shut down. We have also been shut down.
And sorry, go ahead. No, I was gonna say, just similar question to you. I mean, in terms of franchising, like you guys are a plant touching company. You obviously have designs and moving outside of Maryland. How do you navigate those complexities?
Well, so because the franchise model is offering a system in order to run your business, we aren't beholden to the regulations of a plant-touching business, which is an incredible privilege in some ways, because all of us who have built the franchise business together are so focused on a constrained model where we're trying to be creative and work inside these lines, and we finally feel like, oh my God, we can breathe, which is fantastic. But with respect to kind of how we navigate and things that we're doing to help our consumer, or to help our franchisees, it's part of that playbook in the fact that we've looked at all the regulations of the states that we seek to go into, and we're going to pare it down for you so that it's digestible, so you then know how to stay in the lane and don't have to spend your hard-earned time and energy kind of figuring out those best practices.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
All right, I think it's time for audience Q&A. We have time for maybe 2 questions here. Any questions from the audience? I see one hand in the back.
Hi, this question is for Rebecca. Hi, Rebecca. I'm from Maryland too, so it's nice to have a fellow Marylander
nice
up
to
here.
see you here.
Yeah. I am wondering about how much guidance you're planning on giving your franchisees in terms of products. Are you going to be giving them a list of like recommended, or how much they should have on hand? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, so at a high level, the franchising operating manual will give you guidance on the percentage of cannabis products, CBD products, everything broken down in the market you're in with how we've seen different vendors perform in different stores. And at a more granular level, we have marketing and merchandising support to help our franchisees know how to sell through those products once we've brought them in. But the beauty of an owner-operator model is that you know your community best. So while we're, think of it as advisors, we're completely in support of all of our franchisees bringing in local products, things that their patients are telling them they want, because at the end of the day, it is your business and your success is our success.
One more question. Okay, I have a question for Gena. I feel like right now flower is king, and it makes sense that a lot of people would want your products. But as more vape products or edibles products sort of begin to take over larger portions of the market, do you have a strategy to sort of target those categories of consumers, or are you still just thinking flower is king? That's what we're focusing on.
Flower is king.
Flower is king.
Flower's going nowhere. But it's interesting you should say that. The good thing about our product and the good thing with our scent technology is that while we have the cannabis consumer, we also have the non-cannabis consumer, because the technology also works to reduce lingering common odors. So think of tobacco, pet, and food. So we have a group of consumers on our base who are pet owners who don't consume, who do smoke cigarettes but don't consume cannabis. So that still allows us to keep our arms on both sides of the industry. But flower's king. It's not going anywhere.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Rebecca and Gena. We are now going to move on to Ask Me Anything session with Harris Bricken. Please welcome Simone Malinowski, Managing Attorney with Harris Bricken. Note, this information provided by Harris Bricken is intended for communication purposes and does not constitute or contain formal legal advice or solicitation of legal services.
Now that we have that note out of the way, Simone, how are you today?
Of course, the lawyer's the only one that starts with a legal disclaimer, so.
All right, Simone, could you start with a quick intro of yourself, and then we can jump into the questions here.
Sure. So Harris Bricken is an international law firm. We've been on the forefront of the legal cannabis industry since 2011, when Washington State first legalized medical cannabis. The practice was started by a then first-year associate named Hillary Bricken, the Bricken and Harris Bricken, and a lowly summer associate named Simone Malinowski. We opened the New York office on March 15th of 2021. It's a relevant date because it's kismet. March 15th is the date that it was kind of informally announced that the MRTA was going to pass. Beyond that, we also run the Canna Law blog, so unless we get some really adventurous questions today, the majority of the answers that I'll give, we write about on a daily basis. We kind of try to stay as on top of developments in the cannabis industry nationally as well as in New York.
And just to kick things off, how did you yourself get interested in cannabis? Like, what sort of cued you into it?
I'm going to give the most PC answer I can. As a firm, but personally, we've always tried to explore niche markets and to kind of push ourselves into industries that are new and developing. That was certainly the case in Washington in 2011. As a native New Yorker, it's very exciting to be on the forefront of the cannabis industry in New York. You know, you've already heard a lot about how New York tends to be on the forefront of things from a luxury perspective, from just how the industry develops, and so that really is how we ended up here, and we saw that this was a real opportunity, and it's something that we've been very excited to be a part of.
And the non-PC? No.
Yeah, give us the real answer. All right, guys, this section of our panel is going to look a little different. The whole 15 minutes is going to be taken up by audience questions, so if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand.
Just wondering a little bit about your client flow these days. We've got a very, I think it's safe to say, innovative model that's being rolled out on the dispensary side for conditional dispensary licenses here in New York. And I'm wondering if you're seeing traction on the client side, folks that qualify and are looking to this program and are really excited about this program, and some thoughts about how DASNY is starting to roll this out.
So that's kind of a two-part answer. In terms of client flow generally, what we've seen is kind of two waves. Initially, when the MRTA was passed, we had a significant inflow of prospective clients, then ultimately clients who decided that they wanted to retain an attorney and be ready for when things really started moving. And so I would say that there was probably a good portion of people who said, we're ready to take this leap. We want to be in the industry. We have the capital to invest in it, and we're retaining an attorney now. Some people decided that given the fact that New York has taken some time to roll out the actual program, that they were going to wait. And then there was kind of a lull for a period of time as we've waited for the rules and regulations, some of which have come out, the majority of which haven't. And now that we've gotten closer, the CCB has been formed, the OCM has been formed, and we're at a position where, you know, every week we're waiting to see all of the rules and regulations. We've seen another significant uptick in terms of clients who are ready to take the leap, because everyone wants to be ready to pull the trigger as soon as things start happening. And I know it's a self-serving statement, but having an attorney who's part of the process, having a law firm that has experience in the industry, it's a very important part of this because it's a complex regulatory framework. And there's, as the accountant mentioned, a lot of gray areas to navigate, and that's really where you need a guide to get through it.
So as a bunch of people have mentioned, there are a lot of gray areas, a lot of really nebulous laws when it comes to cannabis. What are some of the most kind of difficult or challenging laws that you have had to help clients navigate, and how are you expecting the laws to shape up, or hoping the laws shape up a little differently in New York?
So in New York, it's a complex answer because the rules and regulations haven't actually been released. And so, we have the conditional retail dispensary license where we have seen the rules and regulations, and that's expressly a social equity program. There's the conditional cultivator license, which is for people who've already been licensed in the hemp industry who can move over, and that has a lot to do with building supply in advance of the industry running. What we really see a lot of is a lot of misinformation, and a lot of the calls that we get from clients, particularly we're in this, not to make a pun of it, but gray area before the actual rules and regulations have been released, but we've seen the MRTA and the direction everything is supposed to go in. And so, a lot of times there'll be articles that are written that give kind of half information, and then we'll get calls from clients that say, well, hold on a second, why haven't we submitted our application yet? And the answer is, one, there's no application to submit yet, and two, you don't come close to qualifying to this one small piece of the puzzle that's being talked about. And, from an actual rulemaking perspective, Mitch touched on it earlier, New York has a lot of predecessors to go by, other states that have rolled out adult use programs. The hope is that we take what we can and learn from the good parts of it and incorporate the things that are unique to New York. And so my view on it is that New York really has this opportunity to be the vanguard of the legal cannabis industry from a state perspective. I think that we have made some headway in terms of doing things the right way. I think that there are some missteps, but I think that happens anytime you're building something from scratch. And the hope is that once we see the rules and regulations, we'll get a better sense that we're doing things the right way from the beginning.
Just out of curiosity, when people are planning, from your experience, are you seeing people with social equity, true to what New York wanted to accomplish, in mind, or people looking to apply for licenses without? How important has it been from your experience to your clients?
It's been about a 50-50 split, actually, between, I'll call it non-social equity applicants and social equity applicants. A significant portion of that is the woman community, right? And I think it's a really important part of the social equity program, which is that we have seen a lot of people come and approach us in terms of getting ready to submit applications as soon as possible. There are also a lot of people who have established successful businesses in other states, many of whom have ties to New York or are native New Yorkers from a statewide perspective, who are looking at this as an opportunity to come home. And so, I would say it's been pretty even, and one of the things that I think is a really interesting opportunity, and I'm curious to see how the CCB deals with it, is I think that there really can be an opportunity for partnership between the social equity and the non-social equity community, because it is a difficult industry. There are high capital expenses, and I think if done the right way, it's possible to create opportunities for social equity applicants to have meaningful success in the industry over the long term.
I think I saw a question in the back.
Hi. Right now, I know that often we hear that the product that's put in the package differs widely in terms of how much CBD, how much THC is in it, and because there's no regulation on that, we're not able to know what's really inside of the bottle or what have you, and that kind of hurts the industry because of the effectiveness. Well, what kind of things are you telling your clients to prepare for in terms of disclosures, in terms of what's in the product, and getting ready for more regulations coming along in that space?
So the MRTA, and again, we haven't seen the rules and regs on this specific issue, but the MRTA is really clear on this. There are going to be testing requirements, and there are going to be very explicit labeling requirements for products. And part of that is for consumer protection, and I think that that's a very important part of this. But part of this is also kind of the societal battle that everyone who's in the industry is facing, right? We are all very excited that we're now legal, but as we know in this country, politicians and judges can do the wrong thing when given the circumstance. And it is really important to be able to demonstrate to the other side why this industry serves a public good and is not harmful. And a large part of that is being able to say that what we're selling is in fact what we're selling and is not harmful to the public. And so labeling, testing, and ultimately being able to demonstrate that what you're doing is in compliance with what the state has determined is good for the public is very important. It's something that we push our clients on heavily.
Any other questions? I have a question.
Shoot.
What is the most common question you hear from clients? And what's the answer to that question? This is not legal advice.
It generally falls into two categories. The first category is, what should we do to start to prepare for submitting an application? And the answer is nuanced, and it really depends on the client specifically, but the first is to really think long and hard about what specific license you want to apply for, because New York has a ban on vertical integration. That decision is important to make early on in the process. Do you want to be on the retail side? Do you want to be on the production side? Because there's no crossing that line. The second is really giving thought about where you want to operate. And New York has in the MRTA a requirement that your real estate is secured at the time of your application. There's some kind of exceptions to that, but it's an important part of it. And so getting ahead of the game in terms of knowing what you want to apply for and where you want to operate, particularly in a real estate market like New York that is as competitive as it is getting ahead of the game. Putting the right team around you is an important part of that, be it attorneys, accountants, real estate brokers, but the sorts of things that you will need to get in order in order to apply for a license. The other part of it is we often get asked real estate questions very early on in the process. It's a topic that for me is not only interesting because I have spent a lot of time practicing real estate law as a native New Yorker. It's something that, it's really kind of almost impossible to not be somehow tied into real estate if you live here. And navigating that is something that lots of clients ask about, and kind of wisely so. There are lots of misconceptions about the cannabis industry and real estate. There are a lot of missteps that people can make if they don't ask the right questions, and a perfect example of it is we've had situations where clients will start talking to a landlord about leasing retail space without talking to us. And they'll go into 3 or 4 months of negotiations, and the landlord and our client will have thought that they've reached some sort of arrangement that will work. And then the lawyers get brought in, and the first question that's asked is, well, does the landlord have a mortgage on the property? And is that mortgage issued by a federally insured bank? And if the answer is yes, then there's no lease. And so in an industry where you need to be able to move quickly, in that circumstance, you have a client who's wasted 4 months of trying to figure things out and feel like they've now reached the conclusion where now they just need to cancel everything and start over.
How often does that happen?
More than you would think. And it is part of the reason why we ask our clients when they decide that they're going to start taking the leap in terms of real estate to talk to us regularly. And it's an important part of vetting the real estate broker that you use, because there are a lot of real estate brokers in New York. There are a lot of people who, this is industry-wide, suddenly proclaim themselves to be cannabis industry experts. And it's the devil's really in the details. And if you don't know those nuances, you really risk wasting time and money.
Great. We have time for one quick question over here.
Yeah, I can just go on.
Sure.
So I know you spoke a little bit about how you came up with the areas, but I'm interested in whether or not you intersect a lot with businesses that are potentially going to embrace things. And so businesses that are doing addiction and things like that, what kind of advice you give those businesses that are attempting to stay in great spaces?
Not to do it. This is a topic that's like very near and dear to me. And near and dear from the perspective that I feel so strongly about it. I have written on this almost since the beginning and continue to do so. The gray area, the cannabis clubs, you know, I know that they feel from a legal perspective that they're on safe grounds. The CCB and the OCM have issued cease and desist letters. There's pending legislation that has to do with penalizing people who operate before they're supposed to be operating. And I'm 100% on board with what the CCB and the OCM are doing, and I hope that that legislation passes. I know that that may sound harsh, but the reason for it is this. We, as I mentioned before, are kind of fighting a two-pronged battle, and part of that is public opinion. And in order for New York, but nationally as well, to have a functioning and well-regulated legal cannabis industry, everyone has to play by the same rules. And I understand that everyone is very excited about kind of getting their foot in the door and starting early, and that it's really frustrating to have to wait 6, 12, 18 months between when the MRTA was passed and when you can get licensed. But the only way that this is going to work in the long term is if we have a system set up where the people who are playing by the rules succeed, and that the people who decide that they're just going to cut the line or try to do it are incentivized to do so.
So I'm from Jersey, and there's a lot of it happening right now. So that was, you know, the reason, you know, for that question. So thanks.
I think we got to wrap it up there. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. There's no legal advice, and we appreciate it.